Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, Junior on Security. In this video, I'm going to show you how to solve a web exploitation CTF challenge from PicoCTF 2021. The challenge is called Scavenger Hunt. I've summarized the most important information about the challenge on this slide. The task is to find some interesting information hidden around the site. You'll also find a link to the challenge in the video description below. Before jumping into the challenge, I want to talk briefly about inspecting a web application. To inspect the web application means to examine its source code. This includes the following components: HTML or hypertext markup language. This is the standard markup language for documents designed to be displayed in a web browser. HTML describes the structure of a web page by using HTML elements. CSS or cascading style sheets. CSS is used to describe presentation of a document written in HTML. CSS controls, for example, layout, colors, and fonts. JavaScript. JavaScript makes a web application interactive. When the user, for example, clicks a button in the application, a JavaScript function is triggered and changes what is displayed on the screen. Web browsers have built-in inspection tools, which can be used to inspect a web application. Apart from just inspecting the application, the source code can also be modified with the Inspect tool. The changes are shown live inside the browser window. An example could be to do a CSS change to alter the color of an element. Inspecting a web application can help identify potential bugs. It can also help web professionals check for functionality, usability, accessibility, security, compatibility, and performance of the web application. For your reference, I'll put a link to Mozilla's documentation explaining the Firefox page inspector in the video description. Let's jump into the application. Here is the challenge. Let's click the link to start the application. Let's open the developer tools and the network tab. First, we retrieve the HTML. We can inspect the HTML by just right-clicking on the page and choosing Inspect. Here we see the HTML page. Let's start by checking the head tag. We see that the title of the application is Scavenger Hunt. We load some fonts, and then we have links to a style sheet as well as to a JavaScript file. Then comes the body of the HTML page. We have a header, some buttons, and two divs. And here we have the first part of the flag, PicoCTF T. So let's copy that. Let's continue by checking the CSS part of the application. So we switch to the style editor. Here we see two CSS files. We have some general CSS. Nothing of interest there. Then we have the mycss.css file. Here we have some custom CSS tags. And below we have a comment. And there we have the second part of the flag. So let's copy that as well. Now that we've found one flag in the HTML file and one flag in the CSS file, let's also check the JavaScript file. Here we have the JavaScript file. There is no flag here, but there's a clue down at the bottom. How can I keep Google from indexing my website? Well, typically there's a file called robots.txt, and this file tells Google what it's allowed to index. Here we have the third part of the flag, so let's copy that as well. We also receive a fourth clue. I think this is an Apache server. Can you access the next flag? I'm not very familiar with the endpoints which are made available by default by Apache or an Apache server. So for the next part of this challenge, I want to introduce the concept of content discovery. Content discovery is a technique for finding hidden content on websites. Content discovery is basically looking for files, folders, or paths that are not meant to be seen by the public, but are still accessible if you know their names. For example, imagine you have a website where you share your awesome travel photos. You want everyone to see your amazing adventures, but you don't want everyone to be able to edit or delete your photos. You may have a secret page where you can log in and manage your website. Now web servers are usually set up to serve these files and folders unless they are specifically blocked. Content discovery is a useful technique because it can help us find things that we are not supposed to see. For example, we may be able to find database files, API keys and tokens, logs, web frameworks, or hidden pages or features. These are just some examples of the kinds of content that we may be able to discover by using this technique. We can find this content by knowing their names or extensions. For example, we can look for database files with the extension of .db. You can do this manually by guessing some names like admin or database.db and typing them in your browser, but that would be slow and boring. Luckily, we have tools that can do this for us much faster and easier. Let's look at one of these tools. The Forced Browse add-on in OWASP SAP is a powerful tool that can help you find hidden directories and files on web applications. Forced Browse is a technique that tries to access files and directories directly without relying on links or references. For example, if you know that the web application has an admin panel, but you don't know where it is, you can use Forced Browse to guess its location by trying different names and extensions. Forced Browse works by using a word list, which is a file that contains a lot of common or possible names for files and directories. For example, admin, login, backup, config, etc. Forced Browse takes each name from the word list and appends it to the base URL of the web application. Then it sends a request to that URL and checks for the response. If the response is different from the expected fail case, then it means that the file or directory exists. Forced Browse is based on code from the now retired OWASP Dirbuster project, which was a popular tool for content discovery. To use Forced Browse in SAP, you need to install the add-on first. You can do this by going to the SAP Marketplace and searching for Forced Browse. Then click on Install and restart SAP. Once you have installed the add-on, you can access it from the Forced Browse tab or from the right-click menu on the Sites tree. You can choose to force browse a site, a directory, or a directory and its children. To start a force browse scan, you need to select a word list file from the drop-down menu. You can use the default ones provided by the SAP or add your own custom ones. You can also configure some options for the scan, such as the number of concurrent threads per host, whether to recurse through subdirectories, whether to force browse files without extension, whether to force browse files with extension, what extensions to use or ignore, what fail case string to use. You can find more details about these options in the Options Forced Browse screen. Once you have configured your scan, click on Start Scan and wait for the results. You will see a list of files and directories that were found by Forced Browse. You can double-click on any item to open it in your browser or right-click on it to access more options. I've now started OWASP SAP. I'll show you where to find the Forced Browse add-on. So go to Online and then SAP Marketplace. Then we can search for Forced Browse. And here we have the add-on. This is already installed in my installation of OWASP SAP, so I'm not going to install it. Let's now use Forced Browse to do content discovery on our application. Let's configure the word list that we want to use for the Forced Browse. Let's go to Tools and Options. Select Forced Browse and then select File. In Kali Linux, there are a couple of word lists installed by default. So let's go to USR. Share. Word lists. I'm going to use the dirb word list. Now I'm going to go with the common one. So let's open that one. There we go. Let's click OK. I'll paste the URL of our application. And then I launch the browser. This opens up our application in a new window. Let's right-click a request which was made to the application which we want to forced browse. Select Attack and Forced Browse Site. This starts the forced browse, and we can see that the common.txt list that we selected earlier is used. Here we can see that there has already been 2 hits. This looks like an interesting hit, so let's stop the scan. And let's right-click this one and open the URL in the browser. So let's use Firefox since we already have it started. This opens up the URL that we discovered. And here we see that we have found the flag. So let's copy that. We also get a clue to the 5th part of the flag. I love making websites on my Mac. I can store a lot of information there. I'm not a Mac user, so the clue didn't really help me much here. After Googling without finding much of interest, I turned to Bing, which gave me the following answer. Some common operating system files for Mac OS are .app, application bundle, .dmg, disk image, .pkg, package installer, .plist, property list, .kxt, kernel extension, .dylib, dynamic library, .framework, framework bundle, .launchd, launch daemon, .bash profile, shell configuration, and .ds_store directory information. If you're stuck, it can often help to chat with ChatGPT, Bing, UChat, or whatever LLM chatbot you prefer to get them blocked. The file that looks most promising to me is .ds_store, so let's try it out. Back in the application, I'll replace robots with .ds_store. Congrats, you completed the scavenger hunt. Here we found part 5 of the flag, so let's copy that. Let's put the flag that we have retrieved into the submission box and submit. Hooray, you earned 50 points. we solve the challenge. The techniques that we use to retrieve the flag are called Web Application Inspection and Content Discovery. Now that we've solved the challenge, let's summarize the main lessons learned. To inspect the web application means to examine its source code, which includes HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML is the standard markup language for documents designed to be displayed in a web browser and describes the structure of a web page using HTML elements. CSS is used to describe the presentation of an HTML document and controls layout, colors, and fonts. JavaScript makes a web application interactive by triggering functions that change what is displayed on the screen when the user interacts with it. Web browsers have built-in inspection tools that can be used to inspect and modify the source code of a web application. Inspecting a web application can help identify potential bugs. Content discovery is a technique to find hidden files and directories on web applications by trying different names and extensions. Forced Browse is an add-on for OWASP SAP that automates content discovery using a word list and some options. It can help hackers find valuable information that is not linked or referenced by the web application. Learning to use the inspection tools of your web browser and content discovery tools is a skill that you need to know if you want to get into web exploitation. Of course, there is much more to learn and practice in this field, but I hope this walkthrough has given you some useful insights and tips on how to get started. If you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to add a comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for more videos on CTFs and other security-related topics. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.